Okay guys, we just finished 5.2. Now we're going to move on to calculating length of stay in an outpatient setting, and you'll see that I don't have a ton highlighted right here, and that's mostly because the way that length of stay is taken in an outpatient setting is very different. It's based on minutes and arrival time, and typically your outpatient departments, the ERs or an outpatient clinic will have their own policies about how they count the minutes that a patient has to wait. And you've probably seen it if you live locally, that ERs like to talk about your wait time, from the time that you walk into the door to the time that you're triaged, and how little of a wait time that is, and they use that for competitive purposes. You know, come see us in our ER, our wait times are X. So it is something that's calculated, but it's all about minutes. So we'll take a look at that over here on 5.3, which I know that you have the answers to in the back of the book, and you can check yourself. But here's your example of when a patient came to a physician's office and the time seen by the physician, and then what was the time that they had to wait. And so what a physician's office would do is they would probably have a benchmark time that they're trying to meet, meaning that they don't want their patients sitting out in the waiting room but for a certain amount of time. And let's say that possibly, which I would hope it would be, that this 1:30 to 3 p.m. fell out of that benchmark, because that's an hour and a half, but by the time they checked in until the time they saw a physician, and that may need a little, what's the word I'm looking for, further study. Why did that patient sit out in the waiting area or in the patient room for so long until they saw a physician? So that's how they would use it. And then number 2 talks about an ER. So time of arrival versus the time the patient was triaged. And so if you've ever been in an ER, triage is the usually the first step, where they take you into a room, do your vitals, find out if you're a walk-in, not necessarily a trauma patient, but they get your vitals and they put you into the queue, the work queue, for a physician to see you. All right, so at the top of page 76, your textbook goes over total length of stay, and it's like the rest of our totals, y'all. It's the sum of any group of days of stay. So that's pretty easy. So if you take a look at 5.4, using the table below, answer the following questions for this group of 15 patients. And so you've been given community hospital discharge list, and this list of patients they were all discharged on October the 20th, and they've got varying admission dates, then varying ages and clinical services. And so that's represented over here in the multitude of things that they ask you to do, but this is how they're getting you to practice length of stay. But what would be most important is that you got the actual length of stay number right to begin with. So that's what's one of the important things. So let's take a look at 5.4. So if you are looking at Schulman, you should see 32 days. I can write that in there for y'all so you have it. So 32, because you don't have the answer to this one. 32 for Schulman. 38 Hubbard, 2 days Miraboto, is that how you say that? Miraboto, do not know. Tatum is 2 days. Rankin, 22. Lampton, 46. I don't even know how to pronounce that one. Ruska, 15. Admin, 1. Savage, somebody's last name Savage, 49. Beachton, 19. Good grief. Pavlicek? Am I off? Wait a minute. Beachton, 19. Pavlicek, Oh, wait, I skipped one. Sanders. Sanders is 3 days. I was panicking about Pavlicek, so I just skipped over Sanders. Sanders is 24. Walters is 20. Harding is 19. And Clay is 10. And so hopefully you came up with a total of 302 days. So that is the total length of stay for everybody in the discharge list. And then for each individual patient, you've got the answers. For length of stay for all patients, B is 302. And then your answers, if you got the same number of length of stay that I did, the total length of stay for medicine is going to be 203. Surgery is 91. OB is 8. 25 years of age and younger, again, you're referring to the age column. At that point, you're going to pull all the patients out of the age categories for the questions that are being asked. So under 25 is 6, 89 for 26 to 40. Oops, sorry about that. And then H is 53, I is 44. And then for patients over 70, their length of stay was 10. And what percentage of medicine discharges were there? So you're going to, and it's asking you to round to the decimal place. So out of 302 actual over potential. So of 302 potential, you pull out all the medicine, which you answered up here, so 203 divided by 302 should be 67.2. Oh, sorry, I ran out of room there. 67.2. So that is a percent. I'm going to have to put that down below because I ran out of room. Multiply that by 100, right? What percentage of medicine discharges were there? Okie dokie. So if you move to the top of page 78, where we're going to talk about average length of stay, you're going to get your formula that we were used to seeing already in chapter 4, right? When we talked about how to calculate ALOS that we needed for our bed turnover problems. But here it is again on page 78. So the total length of stay, or otherwise known as discharge days, over total discharges including deaths. Now reminding you that what's in parentheses is a reminder. It doesn't have a plus in front of it. So if you've got the total number of discharges in front of you, you don't have to add the deaths. But if you've got live discharges, this is reminding you to add the deaths. So remember that most of the times in these parentheses, it's a reminder, not actually asking you to do something. Okie dokie. So exercise 5.5 you should have all of the answers to. We'll look at number 3 because that is actually the calculation using the formula on the page prior. And so if you're setting up the average length of stay for the medicine service and looking at the table, you're going to find that if you use the total length of stay or discharge days, right, is what your formula said, then it's discharge days 61,400 over total number of discharges 12,280 for 5.0 is the ALOS. 5.0. And so, like I said, you have the answers for 5.5 in the back of the book, and it's discharge days to discharges. That's how you set it up. Follow the formula. Average newborn length of stay, same situation, right? Except, we're talking about adults and children here. We're talking about newborns on page 79. So total newborn discharge days over total newborn discharges, and it's reminding you to make sure you've got all your deaths. And then in 5.6, using the table below, calculate ALOS for newborns in each month and then the annual ALOS. So it's discharge days to discharges. And so if we work the first one, we're going to have 278 discharge days over 103 discharges for January. And that's going to give us, and it says round to one decimal place, 2.7 as the ALOS for newborns. So February was, I'll write this out, I know it's to the side, but February, if you want to check yourself, was 3.3. March was 2.3. April is 2.0. May is, let me flip my page, May is 2.2. June is 2.8. July is 2.6. August is 2.7. September is 3.1. October is 2.7. November 2.8. And December is 2.6. So to calculate the totals, you had to add up all of the newborn discharges and all of the discharge days. So hopefully you had 1,791 for your total number of newborn discharges. And then for your discharge days, hopefully, when you added that up, you had 4,751 for 2.7 days. Okie dokie. So we talked a little bit about leave of absence before and what happens with a leave of absence, and that nowadays, instead of letting your patients just go for a few hours, hospitals are actually going to discharge them, and so then we would calculate it that way. But we have talked about leave of absence, and what we find again nowadays is the trend that hospitals are discharging their patients versus just allowing them to leave for a few hours. 5.7 you do have the answers to, but we'll take a look at it too using the statistics in the table below. Determine the following calculations for a community hospital. Compute the LOS for each of the patients in the table. Remember that 2012 was a leap year. If no year is specified, you're going to assume it's not a leap year, and then both dates are in the same year. And so these are your answers for the LOS that are also available in the back of the book, evidently. And then the total, once you've created the length of stay in this column, you're going to total it up for number 2. For the rest of 5.7, again, you've got the ability to check yourself. I'm going to scoot down to 5.8, which does say omit from homework. It's several pages long. The answer ends up being in a spreadsheet. You can see it right here. If you went through the trouble to do 5.8 and filled it in, your totals at the bottom, let's talk about what those totals would be. So it's going to be, let's see here. See if I can get you totals. I may just, let's see, keep flipping. It's just pages of it. So yeah, it starts back over here. That's why I couldn't find it. So you're just having to take the information in the column and add the subtotals and then your totals and carry that through all the way through to the totals. That's why I said you can omit that one, because that definitely is a lot of extra work, and you're going to get plenty of time to practice on your matching quiz and the review, as well as the worksheets that I'm going to post for you. So, kind of summing up average length of stay, it's a pretty simple chapter. You've got just a couple of formulas that you have to worry about. The key thing, y'all, that I want you to take away is from page 72, where it talks about the rule, where we talked about subtraction in the first video. So if you're missing using the subtraction, go back to counting the days like I showed you in the first video.